So let's dive into that first album. So Nevermind from Nirvana comes out in 1991. I have so much to say about this because this is one of my favorite albums of all time. So I was excited to see it on the list here so I could dive into it once again. Do you remember the first time you heard the album Nevermind? Most people, it's from the single Smells Like Teen Spirit that took over the world.
Yeah. The first thing I actually remember about the album was the cover. I went into I went into like I lived up in Northern Ontario, so it was like a convenience store. They would have like all these top albums. You get the Michael Jackson, the Queen, and somewhere in there was like a floating naked baby, and it was just like how old was I? So 91. So I was like 9 years old. So it kind of like threw me off. It wasn't like I'm gonna dive into this album because it was like, this is such a strange cover. I was actually a huge Queen fan because there's like what my dad liked. So it was one of those kind of things that I didn't even have my own taste in music at this point. But I remember hearing on a separate occasion Teen Spirit on Much Music, and I did not put together that cover and that song were a thing. So still, it was probably a couple of years before I actually like figured that out. It might have been another year or so, like further on in their career. Like their major career didn't really last that long. You know, I mean, it was like 3 years, and it kind of went and gone. But when I heard Teen Spirit, I was like, what is this song? And like automatically was just drawn to it. And then when I found out through a buddy who had the album that that's what the two things were, then it opened up a whole different thing. And, you know, started listen to the album, and you have right after Teen Spirit, another banger in Bloom. And it's just like the power behind all that. And even at the age of 9 or 10, you still, even though you hear it differently, like I hear the album differently now than I did then, it's still like, it's still so like important, you know. It's never lost that. And through the years, I've obsessed about Nirvana and Kurt Cobain and Dave Grohl and all these things. So you kind of reading the books and just seeing the history and all the allure that's around his death, all these things, you know, like as years go on, you like learn about them. It's an album that's definitely stuck with me and never gets old, front to back. It's a banger.
So that album cover, for our listeners, if you don't know it, it's one of the most famous album covers in music history. So there's a naked baby in a pool swimming towards a dollar bill that's on a hook. And it represents something. And what's funny is the baby in that picture, the guy's name is Spencer Eldon. And, that album came out in 91. So this is, 30 plus years ago. So that kid over the years has multiple times filed lawsuits against Nirvana trying to cash in on the fact that he's that kid. And,
after doing it, like redoing it so many times, right?
Right. So what's funny is, and this hurt him with the lawsuits, is so he filed these lawsuits essentially saying it's child exploitation, it's child pornography, it's whatever against his will. He was a baby. He couldn't choose to be in that picture or not. It's his private parts that are in the public domain. And the thing that came back to hurt him was for 30 years before the lawsuits, he cashed in on all these opportunities as the Nirvana baby. Like he loved that and he exploited it. And he has a Nirvana Nevermind tattoo on his chest. So this all hurts him. And he had done different events as the Nirvana baby and cashed in. So he's made money off of it. So there was a lawsuit. It got thrown out. He tried again, changing what the lawsuit was, tried again. And eventually just last year, it comes out in 91, just last year, it's been finalized for the last time. The final lawsuit was stopped. They said he can no longer file lawsuits. And a big part was there's a number of years in which you can sue for something. And he had waited way too long to actually file the lawsuit for it. So I thought that was kind of funny.
No, it's it's funny and ridiculous because it's only recently around the 30th anniversary where the script flipped from. Up to then, it was like, oh yeah, I'm 20 years old, I'm naked in the pool or in boxers. It's like all fun and games. And all of a sudden, wait, now he's trying to sue. You know, I guess all his money ran out, because that's what it seems like comes down for. That's what everybody wants, essentially. You know, at some point, it's like, oh, I maybe could get more money out of this, and that's silly.
So the album comes out in 1991. It becomes one of the most acclaimed, one of the most acclaimed and influential albums in music history. It goes diamond in the US. It sells over 30 million copies worldwide. So it's one of the best-selling albums of all time, period.
Yeah.
And one thing that's cool is on the last episode of my five favorite albums, I had David Bottrell, 3-time Grammy award-winning producer. He did albums for Tool and Peter Gabriel, all these huge artists. And in his 5 favorite albums, so he didn't have Nirvana Nevermind, but he had Radiohead OK Computer. And
Nice.
one thing that I had said is, anytime I see a list of the best albums from the 90s, there's always 2 albums that make that list. There's Nirvana Nevermind in 91, and then, which is the start of the 90s. And then near the end of the 90s, you have Radiohead OK Computer. And what's awesome is, I said that in the last episode. And then in this episode, you have the other album, you have Nevermind in here. So you kind of proved my theory that these are the 2 great 90s albums. Did you ever get into Radiohead OK Computer at all?
Love that album. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Even the one after where they went, I forgot the name of it, but they go a little bit. Kid A, that's right. Yeah, they definitely went on a whole like just left field. It seemed like to almost like less.
More like rock, right? They dropped the guitars, which
they were really experimental, and it still worked for them, which was impressive. But yeah, amazing band. And yes, OK Computer, it's one that I definitely have in rotation certain time of the year. That's kind of like where, if I feel like if you asked me my favorite albums in the summer, I'd give you a whole different list. But
I feel like Sublime would be on that list.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I don't listen to them as much as I used to, but it's when I put it on, I'm like, oh yeah, this is why I love this, for sure.
How incredible is it that you have Dave Grohl, who is the drummer for Nirvana, one of the biggest bands in music history. And then he goes on to be the singer, the guitarist, the songwriter for Foo Fighters, who go on to be one of the biggest bands in music history. So number one, how improbable is it that one person ends up doing those 2 things? And number 2, how talented is Dave Grohl to be the person that has done that?
Yeah, it's like talent, obviously, the serious luck, the skill. And I'm sure the fact that he seems to be a really genuine good dude goes into play too, because you could after Nirvana, you could be an arrogant prick and easily completely go a different way. But he seemed to govern himself in a way that has given him a very long and lucrative career. But he does, he's got his formula. I love Foo Fighters. Those first 2 records also are honorable mentions for myself, because that was the thing with Nirvana, was just like where it started to what it even became. The fact that Dave Grohl has become the biggest rock star, biggest frontman, like there's nothing like that anymore. Like, who's the last rock star that you actually even see on that scale? I don't really know. I mean, maybe the Gallagher brothers, but they're not really together anymore. So it's like, yeah, he's one of the last, I feel, anyways.
Yeah, Nevermind was a turning point in music, because when Nevermind went to number 1, the album that it dethroned, that was already at number 1, was Michael Jackson. So it's like, that's what was popular, Michael Jackson. And this grunge band, before grunge was popular, grunge band from Seattle. And there were, there wasn't a big budget for the album. They didn't have high expectations. So this grunge band dethrones Michael Jackson, and it showed a turning point of where music was and then where music went for years after that.
Love that. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think makes Nevermind such a great album?
I don't know, man. It's no timing definitely helped. I think just people were over the hair metal and what was going on in rock. Um, and like I guess the climate of what the new generation was feeling versus what happened before too. You know, like there was a different. I don't remember the '80s very well, but just like from seeing the videos and the kind of what was popular, just it seemed like there was a time for change. But the album, it's great song choices, great writing. That just the opening of it too is just so like catchy, you know, like the riff, simple riff into that open drum thing, and then everything comes in. It's just so addictive, and like as soon as you hear it, for me anyways, like I said, I was 9 years old and heard it, and right away like, what the hell's that? And along with the whole other generation of people that were actually more immersed in it, you know, it would have been kind of cool to be a teenager in that time and go see them live, and like be incredible to be in that time. But the album is just, it's powerful. The songs are really good. I love the production on it, even though there's interviews of Kurt saying how
They hated that.
he hated it, but it was just, I think it was just like a, you know, like a silly comment made, because I've recently even both Dave Grohl and Chris Novoselic on separate occasions said like he was hot and cold all the time. Like, we loved the album. They heard it, they were freaking out as a band. Like, as soon as they heard it the first time, they absolutely loved it. And, you know, as success grew, maybe he obviously got too popular for what he expected, and it's hard to handle that, especially at an age in your mid-20s, along with having a serious drug problem too, that'll play with your mind. So, you know, whoever is in your ear, all these things, all of a sudden you're saying how much you don't like the way it sounds, but it sounds great to this day. It friggin' holds up like really, really well. Especially for three guys in a studio, you know. So Butch Vig really did a fantastic job on that. And yeah, I don't know, just right timing for a amazing album.
Yeah, it's such a polished recording. And the album was originally mixed by Butch Vig, who produced it. So he originally mixed it, and he wasn't happy with his mix, and the band wasn't happy with his mix. So they went out looking for someone else to mix it, and they ended up getting Andy Wallace because he had done some Slayer albums. So they thought, well, if this guy can make Slayer, who's really heavy, he can make them sound good, we'll go with him. And again, the album sounds incredible. Over the years, Nirvana members have said it was too polished. And that's why with the next album, In Utero, it's very raw. They went back to more of like a garage sound. And I have a quote here. So Steve Albini ended up producing the next album, In Utero, instead of Butch Vig. And Steve Albini said this about the original mixes from Butch Vig. So he heard them, even though it wasn't the mix used on the album that everyone knows. Steve Albini, he said, Butch Vig's initial mix sounded maybe 200 times more ass-kicking than the final version of Nevermind. So Nevermind, as we know it, sounds incredible, super polished. Yeah. And Steve Albini is saying the actual not as polished mixes from Butch Vig were 200 times more badass. Can you imagine the album sounding any different than it sounds?
I've heard those mixes because they have them on all like the released versions, and it's like they sound good in their own right, but it's like, I don't know, my ears love that, just what it is, you know. I love that it's clean. It's like it's polished, but it's still, you still get like the grit and all the squealing of the guitars and like random, I don't know. I think it sounds great, and I don't know, I love the way it sounds. I wouldn't change anything about it, but
I think the hidden weapon of that album is, yes, it's grunge and it's heavy and it's loud, but if you were to strip away all those heavy instruments, essentially it's a pop album. Like it's a
Totally.
pop album with this heavy exterior. But if you take the whole album and you and I just around a campfire played it acoustic, it's like Beatles type melodies, which was a big influence on Kurt Cobain.
Oh
And
yeah.
I think that's what he did different with this album, is instead of heavy just being heavy for heavy's sake, it's actually very melodic underneath.
Totally. Yeah, I think the compared to In Utero, which was just almost rushed, and you're writing it in the midst of like the chaos that I can't even imagine the level of chaos that they were in. But during that time when he was writing it, versus when he's had almost his whole career up to Nevermind to write this album, polish it, rewrite the songs, like, you know, because some of those songs were, I know, like In Bloom for sure was written way before even Dave Grohl was part of it. So like he's had the ideas, and he's had time to massage it. But the melodies, like you said, are very, very melodic, even with his like strained vocals, which adds this like the grunge to it. But the melodies are very melodic, they stick in your head, super catchy stuff. So yeah, it was like a really, really interesting way of creating a new genre almost.
So the 4 singles: Smells Like Teen Spirit, Come As You Are, Lithium, and In Bloom. And the label released Smells Like Teen Spirit as the first single because they thought it would generate this alternative rock fan base. So they didn't have high expectations, but they thought it was a good way of creating the image of the sound they wanted for the band. But they all thought Come As You Are was the big single. So it was everything was leading to when Come As You Are eventually comes out, that's where the album will do pretty well. So they didn't expect what happened with Smells Like Teen Spirit. So it's kind of funny that
they only
it's not what you think.
They only pressed, I think, 50,000 copies or something at the beginning, and then just obviously couldn't keep it stocked. My understanding was it was the when they released the video was like when it really popped off.
It just captured that energy, right?
Well,
the cheerleaders in a high school.
So dirty, so like, you know, just like pep rally gone nuts. Such a cool, just nothing. There was nothing like it. But
I have a cool quote about Smells Like Teen Spirit. So this is from the president of Geffen Records. He had said Smells Like Teen Spirit had become a hit, and the album was selling so fast that none of Geffen's marketing strategies could be enacted. They didn't have enough time to actually follow through with the marketing. And he says, he told the New York Times, "We didn't do anything. It was one of those get out of the way and duck records where it was the strength of the music itself that propelled that album."
Yeah, no, it connected with a generation. It was like time to be a little angry and a little sad, but at the same time party, I guess, you know, because it has an energy to it, but like it's very angsty, like teenage life is hard, which it definitely is. It just connected the right way. So it's awesome. To this day, still one of my favorite. And when I put it on, I will listen through every single track.
My favorite song on that album has always been Lounge Act. So it's not one of the singles. Yeah. Do you have is there any favorite song on the album? It's so good. Like it's hard to pick one, but single favorite song.
No, Lounge Act is awesome because when I play guitar, it's like the one that's fun to sing. And I love the lyrics. Like just, it's like a kind of a cool romantic almost song. And I like On a Plane too. On a Plane is like a really cool, the melody in it is amazing. And then even with illScarlett, we jam what's it called, Territorial Pissings all the time, which is like
that's more the punk,
awesome punk tune. Yeah, so we've played that live before. It always throws people off like in a good way. They also hear like, what the hell, playing like a Nirvana song, but it works. Yeah, it's hard to say, man. Like they're all so good, you know. Even Something in a Way recently, like years later now, it was like pretty much the soundtrack for the new Batman movie.
They really use that song well.
Yeah, like you never think of that song because at the very end it's so like droney, like, you know, very like almost very sad, and then they added to the movie, whereas things are blowing up. There's all this chaos. Like,
He's like riding on his bike or something during
yeah,
that.
it just like works so well. So it's, you know, the fact that 30 years later, it's that's the one that's coming out, and on Spotify, you look at the numbers, like that movie, like really made those like
the single charted again.
Yeah, brought that song to life. It was crazy.
Yeah, so I was gonna say that another thing that stands out to me are the harmonies. So it has like very subtle and beautiful harmonies, like something in the way, but also songs like Polly. I found that the harmonies, I think Dave Grohl does some of the harmonies, but it's a lot of Cobain doing the harmonies. Did the harmonies stand out to you at all?
I don't know if I when I listen to the album, I'm harmonizing the whole time. So I guess it does. Like, I never really thought about it, but just when I listen to it, it's like that's just the way I sing along. It's like I'm trying to always either find ones that are different, or just like listening to the ones that are there. Just kind of, you know, I feel like I'm more part of the experience when I'm listening to it, when I'm like harmonizing, and I don't know. So yeah, I guess so, because they're such good melodies. It's easy to harmonize too.
Because of the success of Nevermind, I know that my band at the time, when we were writing songs, we would copy Nirvana's where they had the clean verses and then the distortion chorus, right? You'd play clean, and then the big distortion chorus came in. Everyone got the distortion pedal. So that changed the way young bands were writing music. I know my bands, those were our songs: clean verse, distorted chorus. Were you ever in bands where that was also the case?
My first band when I moved to Mississauga was almost strictly a Nirvana cover band. So we would meet up every weekend, come to my house with my two buddies that, you know, had the hair, and like would just like one to be Kurt, and one, you know, just like we were obsessed. The posters everywhere, and we would just for hours just play in my basement. And that's to this another reason I'm thankful to my mom, because I could only imagine how that sounded, just screaming for 4 hours every single Saturday on her day off. But she was super cool about it. So yeah, that was like my first band. And then when Alex and I joined, that's kind of what we knew as well, because we're from the 90s. He's a huge Weezer fan, which has the same dynamic, kind of, you know, loud, quiet, loud, melodic. So our first band, before we were called illScarlett, we were like a little emo band called Saturday Morning Cartoon Special. And it was literally it was that dynamic. It was just like, I'm so sad. Go loud in the choruses. And that's 100%. That's what our musical history has been.
So even though Kurt Cobain was kind of this tortured soul, you know, he struggled with depression and substance abuse. He always had like stomach pains. He always had issues with his stomach. And you and I know, when you don't feel well, it's like that messes with your mental health. And if you don't feel good, it's like life isn't good or isn't great. So despite all that, he was known for his sense of humor. And before they settled on the title Nevermind for this album, the album was actually just called Sheep. They were going to call the album Sheep. And it's because Cobain was referring to the people he thought would buy the album. He thought just the sheep would come out once there's a nice polish on it, once they're on a major label. He thought it would be just the sheep that come out and buy the album. So I thought that was funny. I had never heard that before.
Yeah, no, I haven't heard of it either. Fun fact.
Yeah, Nirvana with their big album Sheep, so it doesn't have the same ring to it. The album got nominated for 3 Grammys, so that was a big deal. And one thing I thought was cool is, when it comes to rap, so this is aside for a second, but when it comes to rap, you know, rap was always about pumping yourself up and about girls and sex and money and all that stuff. And then it was kind of Kanye West and Drake popularized kind of the emo side of rap, where it's okay to talk about your feelings and emotions and sadness. The equivalent is actually Nirvana. And I have a quote here. So it says, contrary to the popular hedonistic themes of drugs and sex at the time, writers have observed that Nevermind reinvigorated sensitivity to mainstream rock. So it kind of did the same thing, where Cobain wasn't singing about girls and money and sex. He brought in something different.
Yeah, that's probably why I connected, because people, you know, especially teenagers, well, everybody actually is going through their own thing, and at a time where mental health wasn't a popular term that was tossed around. You know, so music like that would actually connect with people. I imagine in a way, it's like, wow, somebody else feels shitty, and that's kind of, you know, it's something to latch onto, I guess.
So I have a quote here from a critic that kind of speaks to what you just said. So Michael Azarad said, Nevermind came along at exactly the right time. This was music by, for, and about a whole new group of young people who had been overlooked, ignored, or condescended to. So that's kind of what you said.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So just a couple more things about Nirvana, and then we'll dive into your second album here. So at the end of the Nirvana album Nevermind, there's a hidden track. So it's called Endless Nameless.
Yeah.
And if you now go on Spotify, it's just there as another track, right? You can't really have the hidden track when it's streaming. But what's funny is, in the original pressing of, say, 20 or 30,000 copies, that hidden track, it's supposed to be on the very last song, like 15 minutes.
That's right, the secret song, yeah.
And in the initial pressings, it wasn't there. And what happened is, the guy that mastered the album, he later on said that it was just verbally told to him in passing, like, oh, by the way, we have this song, Endless Nameless. We want it 15 minutes into the final track. And they just kind of told him in passing, and he forgot. He never wrote it down. Yeah. So the first 20 or 30,000 albums do not have a hidden track.
Wow, that'd be a good one to have.
You know, the other 30 million copies since then have it. So I thought that was a cool little bit of like music history there.
See, I didn't know about that track. And the first time I heard it, it scared the living shit out of me, because I had it cranked on the speaker, and then all of a sudden the album
nothing for a while, and
yeah, it's just like, what's happening? Like, and such a like non-conventional song, you know, he just starts screaming, going on a tangent. So it's like I didn't even love it. I didn't find the love for that song till like later on, because it was like the rest of the album so poppy and so melodic, and then you have this like beast coming out of a cave thing happening, and it was just like super weird. But the artistry, I appreciate the artistry now, and I love it. Now I love it, but it took me a while to love it.
So two final things about Nevermind. So Rolling Stone, their list of the 500 greatest albums of all time, they have Nevermind at number 6. Every album released in human history, the 6th greatest album of all time, they have Nevermind. So that's like, that's a huge deal. And the last thing, I have one more quote that I thought helps to describe this album. So Gary Gersh says, there is a pre-Nirvana and a post-Nirvana record business. Nevermind showed that this wasn't some alternative thing happening off in a corner and then back to reality. This is reality.